Good evening, and welcome back to Wisdom by the Fireside. Tonight we sit together once again in the warmth of our shared light, not just to listen, but to witness a journey of faith, betrayal, courage, and divine vindication. Let me ask you something. What would you do if you saw disaster coming and no one believed you? Would you give up and brace for the fall, or fight to change the ending? This is the story of Daniel, a humble finance instructor in Chicago who saw the writing on the wall before anyone else did. But what he chose to do about it, that changed not just his fate, but the fate of those who dared to believe in him. Daniel was never the loudest voice in the room. At 39, he taught finance and derivatives theory at DePaul University. Soft-spoken and modestly dressed, Daniel blended into the background of academic halls filled with louder, shinier personalities. But what most people didn't see beneath his calm demeanor was a mind always ticking, watching, calculating, preparing. In early 2007, Daniel began noticing patterns that unsettled him. Mortgage-backed securities were being sliced, packaged, and sold with reckless optimism. Subprime loans, often issued to people with no proof of income, were skyrocketing. Banks were inflating asset values with barely a whisper of oversight. The machine was overheating, and Daniel knew what came next. He spent long nights at his kitchen table in his modest two-bedroom apartment in Logan Square, reviewing credit default swap structures and housing index projections. He wasn't just paranoid, he was certain the housing bubble would burst. And when it did, the market would collapse. The following week, he invited a few trusted friends and family to his apartment for what he nervously called a financial intervention. His brother Marcus came, along with an old college friend named Victor. His neighbor Claire, recently widowed with 2 children, and 3 of his most advanced students, including Sarah, a single mom putting herself through night school. He passed out a printed packet titled, "The Opportunity Hidden in Collapse." Most thought it was a seminar, but what Daniel proposed shook them. "I believe the economy is heading toward a meltdown," he began. "Not in 10 years, in 1, maybe sooner. I'm creating a fund, not for stocks or bonds, but for shorting the market using options and futures." Marcus, who worked in real estate, scoffed. "You're betting against America?" "I'm not betting against America," Daniel said, eyes steady. "I'm betting against the greed devouring it." They asked questions, challenged him. Victor chuckled and said, "You're asking us to gamble on a crash? That's insane." Claire sat in silence. She'd lost her husband to cancer just the year before. Insurance left her with barely enough to survive. Sarah asked the question that mattered most. "How sure are you, Daniel?" He looked at her without blinking. "Enough to put every dollar I own into it." Daniel had never been a gambler. That's what made his certainty so alarming. He was meticulous, risk-averse by nature. If he was putting all his savings, nearly $82,000, into a fund that would only pay off if the world fell apart, it meant he saw something others didn't. Over the next few weeks, he refined the plan. He created an LLC, Midline Equity Strategies. He would operate it transparently, with clear rules, no management fees. He wouldn't take a cent until investors saw profit. He prepared legal documents, researched brokers who handled inverse ETFs, short positions, and credit default swaps. The rejections came fast. His college dean, "Stick to teaching, Daniel." His uncle, in Detroit, "It's not wise to root for disaster." His ex-girlfriend, she laughed, "You're not smart enough to beat Wall Street." By spring, most of the people he trusted had walked away, but a few didn't. Claire returned one Sunday evening with an envelope. "It's all I have left. 27,000. If you're wrong, I'll lose everything. But I've already lost more than I thought I could. Might as well believe in something." Daniel wanted to cry. Sarah called him at midnight a week later. "I took a second job. If I eat beans for the next year, I can put together $8,000. Victor, despite mocking him earlier, came around too. "Maybe you're right. Maybe they've built a tower on sand. I'm in. 10 grand. In total, Daniel raised just over $142,000, including his own money. It wasn't much by hedge fund standards, but it was everything they had. In June 2007, Midline Equity Strategies placed its first trades, put options on housing ETFs, short positions on banks leveraged in subprime lending, tiny bets on volatility indexes and CDS instruments. Daniel watched the numbers every night, like a surgeon monitoring a critical patient. Summer came and went, the market dipped, but nothing crashed. If anything, stocks were still flirting with all-time highs. By October, Sarah's car was repossessed. Claire couldn't afford new winter coats for her kids. Doubt set in. Investors called him late at night. Victor wanted to cash out. "Man, this isn't working." Daniel begged, "Just wait." Then, in March 2008, Bear Stearns collapsed. Daniel didn't sleep for 3 days. He was watching prophecy unfold. The fall of Bear Stearns was just the tremor. Daniel knew the earthquake hadn't hit yet. The fund was up 60% by April 2008, but he didn't sell. That's when Marcus called him. "You really did it, huh? You're making money while the world burns." Daniel paused. "I didn't want to be right." Marcus, quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is it too late to invest?" Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. He wasn't being spiteful. He was being ethical. The ones who took the risk when it seemed absurd, when people laughed at them, when they had nothing to fall back on, they were the ones who deserved the reward. By September 2008, Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy. Markets were in free fall. Claire called him from a grocery store parking lot. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "My account, it's showing 6 figures." Daniel smiled. "That's not a glitch." Sarah, she broke down sobbing on the phone. "I can pay off my student loans. My son can go to private school. Daniel, you changed everything." Victor flew from Florida to Chicago to hug Daniel in person. He brought a bottle of scotch and left with a promise to buy a house, no mortgage needed. And Daniel, his personal stake of $82,000 turned into $3.4 million. The financial world was collapsing, but their tiny circle was thriving. Not because they took advantage of others, not because they manipulated anything, but because one man saw the storm coming and chose not to run, but to build shelter. That winter, while most Americans were watching their retirement vanish, Daniel moved Claire and her kids to a better neighborhood. He helped Sarah open a 529 college plan for her son. He paid Victor's medical bills. He even sent Marcus a check, not as an investment return, but as a brother. When asked by the media, because yes, his story got out, how he had done it, Daniel simply said, "I didn't try to win against the market. I tried to protect the people I love." The media didn't know what to do with Daniel. He didn't fit the mold of a financial prophet. No fancy suit, no MBA from Wharton, no yacht, just a chalk-stained professor with an old wristwatch and a habit of quoting Psalms when things got tense. Still, stories spread. The professor who beat the crash. He warned them, and they laughed. The Faith Fund, how one man protected the few. Investors from across the country reached out. Venture capitalists, CEOs, even hedge fund managers. They offered him offices, private jets, and partnerships. He said no to all of them. Instead, he returned to his classroom at DePaul in January 2009 like nothing happened. He taught risk management and derivatives to a group of 22 students, none of whom knew they were being taught by the man who had just made headlines around the world. When the department head asked why he hadn't taken the interviews or accepted the investment offers, Daniel answered, "Because I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to be right. And now I just want to help others be ready for storms of their own." But there was something else. Something he never shared publicly. A moment, months before the crash, that gave him the strength to go all in. It happened one night in July 2007. He was alone, exhausted, staring at red numbers on his screen. He doubted himself. The markets were too strong. Maybe he was just paranoid. He closed his laptop, stepped outside, and walked to the little neighborhood chapel down the street. It was empty, save for a janitor in the back pew. Daniel knelt, head bowed. God, am I wrong? And in the silence of that small space, he felt something he never could explain. A peace, a stillness, as if a hand had been laid gently on his shoulder. He got up, walked home, and never questioned the mission again. By 2010, the dust from the Great Recession had begun to settle. Millions had lost jobs, homes, and hope. But those few who trusted Daniel, those who had nothing to lose, were now in a place they never dreamed of reaching. Claire used her earnings to open a children's bookstore in Evanston named Jonathan's Corner after her late husband. It wasn't just a business, it was a healing place. Parents came not just to buy books, but to cry, to share stories, to rebuild community. Sarah finished her finance degree, bought a home in Oak Park, and became a financial counselor for single mothers. She didn't tell them she was wealthy. She just offered guidance, honesty, and empathy. Everything Daniel gave her. Victor finally got the heart surgery he had put off for years. He recovered, traveled, and wrote a memoir titled The Bet That Saved My Life. The dedication page read, "To Daniel, who saw the storm and didn't run." Daniel, however, stayed in the shadows. He declined interviews, turned down awards. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. He bought a modest lake house in Michigan, taught by day, fished by evening, prayed at night. He still wore the same watch, still packed his own lunch. When asked if he'd ever invest again, he always said the same thing. Only if it's about people, not profit. But his story had ripple effects. One of his students, a quiet junior named Wesley, became fascinated by ethical investing. Years later, he launched a non-profit fund that provided loans to small businesses in low-income neighborhoods, citing Daniel's 2008 strategy as his sole inspiration. Daniel had lit torches he would never see burn, and he was okay with that. But the story wasn't done yet, because in the spring of 2015, Daniel received a call that would change everything again. The call came from a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Professor Daniel?" His voice was calm. "Yes. This is Amanda from the White House Office of Financial Literacy. We'd like to invite you to speak at an upcoming summit. We understand you played a pivotal role during the 2008 crisis, and we believe your perspective is essential." Daniel nearly laughed. "I'm not a politician." Amanda replied, "That's exactly why we need you." He said yes, reluctantly. In June 2015, Daniel stood behind a polished oak podium in Washington, D.C., looking out at a room filled with economists, policymakers, and financial journalists. He wore his best tie, the same one from his first year teaching. He began with a story, not of stocks or swaps, but of Claire, the widow who gave him the last of her savings, of Sarah, the single mom who believed when others mocked, of Victor, who once called him crazy, but later called him brother. Then he looked up, steady and sincere. "If you only chase profit, you'll miss the purpose. I didn't predict the crash to make money. I prepared for it to protect people. And if more of us had done the same, maybe the world wouldn't have broken the way it did." There was silence, then a standing ovation. After the summit, Daniel returned home and found something unexpected on his porch. A small box, no name. Inside it, a journal, leather-bound. The first page read, "To the man who changed the course of my life. I never said thank you, so I wrote it instead." It was Claire's son, Liam. He had turned 18, and the entire journal was filled with letters of how Daniel's help saved his mother, shaped his childhood, and inspired him to study economics so he could one day do the same for someone else. Daniel closed the book, heart full, eyes wet. Sometimes God answers prayers with people. Sometimes He makes one voice enough to change many. By 2020, Daniel had officially retired from teaching. Not because he needed to, but because he wanted to leave room for others, younger minds, new voices. He still visited campus once a semester, still answered emails from curious students, still showed up to Sarah's weekend financial literacy workshops to quietly support from the back. He lived simply. No luxury cars, no gated estate, just a weathered house, a fire pit in the backyard, and a well-worn Bible on the nightstand. And yet, his name quietly echoed through economic classrooms and non-profit boardrooms across the country. They didn't call him a genius. They called him honest. They called him faithful. In 2022, he was asked to give one last talk at a small private high school in Chicago. The students were barely toddlers during the 2008 crash, yet they listened with wide eyes, leaning in as he described those tense months before the collapse. A student asked, "Weren't you scared everyone would hate you if you were wrong?" Daniel smiled. "Yes, but faith isn't about certainty. It's about trust. I trusted what I saw, but more importantly, I trusted who I became by standing firm in it." That night, back at his house, he lit a fire in the pit, looked up at the stars, and felt a quiet voice in his chest. "You did what you were sent to do." He had never chased the spotlight. But when the darkness fell, he held up a lamp. For Claire, for Sarah, for Victor, for those who couldn't see the storm coming until someone showed them the way. The story of Daniel isn't just about money. It's about conviction when everyone else calls you crazy. It's about standing on truth, even when you're standing alone. And it's about the ripple effect of one person's courage, how it spreads, touches lives, and quietly transforms the world. Claire's children grew up without fear of eviction. Sarah's son graduated from Northwestern, debt-free. Victor lived another decade, healthy, grateful, and proud. And young men like Liam now walk the same path, carrying Daniel's light into the future. Daniel never became famous, but in small homes, local offices, and quiet conversations, his name meant hope. And now, dear listener, what should we take from Daniel's journey? Maybe this: when you see a storm coming, don't just brace for impact. Prepare, lead, protect those who can't see it yet. Faith isn't about knowing everything. It's about moving forward anyway. And sometimes, the biggest rewards in life aren't money or praise, but the quiet knowledge that you did the right thing when it mattered most. Thank you for being here tonight by the Fireside. You're part of a small circle who still believe stories can change hearts. That courage still exists, that God still works through those who quietly listen and boldly act. If the story touched your heart, share it to the ones you love. And if you would like to listen to more like it, you know where to find us.